My name is Rachel Bennett, and I was 35 years old the night I realized my place in my parents' family could be replaced by a folding chair beside lawn equipment. It happened at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party. A celebration I spent 6 months organizing. A celebration I paid for. A celebration where my father smiled at every guest, except me. When I arrived carrying the anniversary gift I'd spent nearly 2 years preparing, my father barely looked at me before pointing toward the detached garage behind the country club. "Rachel," he said with an easy grin. "We're a little short on seating. Extended family is eating out there." Then he lowered his voice. "You won't make a scene. You're practical." Inside the garage was a plastic table covered with a paper cloth, 3 folding chairs, 2 boxes of Christmas decorations, and a riding lawnmower with a flat tire. Outside, my younger brother Ethan, who hadn't lifted a finger to help, was laughing with guests at the family table. My cousin Tyler, who'd borrowed nearly $20,000 from relatives and never repaid a dime, had a reserved seat beside my mother. Even my father's golf buddies had personalized place cards. But me, I had a paper plate next to a lawnmower, and they all thought I'd accept it, because I always had. What none of them knew, the leather portfolio tucked beneath my arm contained documents that would change ownership of something my father valued more than his own reputation. By sunrise, I'd decide whether he deserved to keep it. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where respect isn't inherited, it has to be earned. If you've ever been treated like the unpaid employee in your own family, subscribe. Because tonight's story is for every person who finally stopped accepting the worst seat at the table. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand the kind of daughter I had been. I wasn't the favorite. I was the reliable one. There's a dangerous difference. My brother Ethan could forget birthdays, lose jobs, show up 2 hours late to Thanksgiving dinner, and somehow everyone laughed about it. That's just Ethan. If I forgot to pick up my mother's dry cleaning, I'd hear about it for weeks. "Rachel, you're usually so dependable." Notice the wording. Usually. As if reliability wasn't something I'd earned but something I owed. By the time I was 23, my parents had quietly divided their children into permanent roles. Ethan brought excitement. I brought solutions. He was celebrated. I was expected. At first, I thought every family worked that way. Then I started paying attention. Friends called their parents because they missed them. My parents called me because something needed fixing. Their internet stopped working. Their taxes looked confusing. Dad forgot another doctor's appointment. Mom couldn't log into her online banking. The water heater needed replacing. Someone had to compare insurance quotes. Grandma's medications needed organizing. Every problem found its way to me. Not because I was the oldest. Because saying no had never occurred to me. I became the family operations department before I realized I wasn't actually part of management. Professionally, I was a commercial real estate attorney, not glamorous television law, real contracts, real negotiations, real estate disputes worth millions. People hired me because I noticed details everyone else missed. Hidden clauses. Forgotten easements. Property liens buried under decades of paperwork. I loved the work. Documents never lied. People did. Ironically, I could uncover fraud between billion-dollar corporations but couldn't recognize the imbalance inside my own family. Looking back now, that's almost funny. Almost. My mother, Linda Bennett, loved appearances. Not expensive appearances. Perfect appearances. She believed every family should look effortless. Holiday cards, matching outfits, fresh flowers, professional photographs, smiling children. She didn't care how exhausted everyone became creating that picture. Only that the picture existed. My father, Charles Bennett, cared about status. He collected recognition the way some people collected stamps. Rotary Club, Golf Association, Historical Society, Church Finance Committee, Neighborhood Board. If there was a plaque available, Charles Bennett wanted his name engraved on it. He loved introducing himself. He loved being admired. He loved telling stories about providing for his family. He rarely mentioned who actually kept that family functioning. Then, there was Ethan, my younger brother by 3 years, handsome, funny, charming, hopelessly irresponsible. He'd changed careers 6 times before turning 32. Started businesses that disappeared within months. Bought cars he couldn't afford. Lived in apartments he couldn't pay for. Somehow every failure became someone else's fault. The economy, my boss, my partners, bad timing, never Ethan. Mom always rescued him. Dad always defended him. I always cleaned up afterward. 6 months before the anniversary party, Mom called on a Tuesday morning. Rachel. No hello. No good morning. Just my name. I've been thinking. Whenever she started a sentence that way, it meant she'd already made a decision. Your father's 40th anniversary deserves something elegant. I agree. I told everyone you're handling it. Of course she had. She continued listing expectations without pausing for confirmation. Country club venue, string quartet, professional photographer, open bar, gold decorations, custom cake, video tribute memory wall, family slideshow, special anniversary gift. We only celebrate 40 years once. Translation: Rachel will figure it out, as always. When I hung up, I opened a fresh notebook. Venue options, guest list, budget, timeline, vendor contacts, color palette, meal preferences, accessibility needs, transportation, accommodation, emergency backups, every detail. For 6 months, my evenings disappeared into planning. The venue alone took 3 weekends. Dad rejected the first country club because the parking lot looked too ordinary. Mom hated the second because the ballroom lighting wasn't flattering. The third finally earned approval. It cost nearly twice my original budget. I paid the deposit myself. They promised to reimburse me. They never did. Not because they refused. Because they forgot. Or claimed they forgot. Funny how selective memory becomes when someone else always covers the bill. The anniversary gift required even more effort. It began almost 2 years earlier, after my grandmother Eleanor passed away. While cleaning her attic, I discovered several weathered journals. Most people would have thrown them away. I read them. Inside those journals, I discovered the real history of our family. Stories my father had never told. Sacrifices he'd conveniently edited. One entry changed everything. Grandpa Henry hadn't built the Bennett family vineyard alone. Grandma Eleanor had secretly mortgaged jewelry, inherited from her mother, to keep the vineyard alive during a devastating freeze. Without her sacrifice, the property would have been auctioned decades earlier. Dad never mentioned that. Every family speech credited Grandpa. Never Grandma. I decided her story deserved better. So over 2 years, I hired historians, photo restoration artists, a documentary editor, a custom book bender. I created a leather-bound family history featuring restored photographs, handwritten journal excerpts, and professionally archived documents proving Grandma had actually saved the vineyard. But that wasn't the real surprise. Hidden inside the portfolio, behind the anniversary book, was something worth considerably more. 10 years earlier, when Dad nearly lost the vineyard because of unpaid property taxes and legal disputes, nobody else wanted to help. Ethan said he couldn't afford it. My parents were too embarrassed to ask relatives, so I quietly stepped in. Using my legal expertise, I negotiated payment plans, resolved old title issues, cleared boundary disputes, prevented foreclosure, spent years handling paperwork nobody even knew existed. I never asked for credit. Because that's what daughters like me did. We fixed disasters quietly. The final document confirming permanent legal protection of the vineyard sat inside that portfolio. It represented thousands of hours. Years of work. Enough legal value to preserve the family's legacy for another generation. It was supposed to be my gift. The week before the anniversary, my assistant Melissa noticed something. You look exhausted. I'll sleep after Saturday? You always say that. But she wasn't wrong. I always postponed myself. Vacations, Dating, weekends, rest. Everything came after family. Melissa smiled. Your parents must be proud. I smiled back. I'm sure they are. Even saying it felt strangely uncertain. The morning of the party began before sunrise. Florist, photographer, cake delivery, sound technician, table assignments, welcome display, memory slideshow, guest favors. Every vendor called me, not my parents, me, because every contract listed Rachel Bennett as the primary contact. By noon, everything was perfect. Gold centerpieces sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Large framed photographs traced 40 years of marriage. Soft violin music echoed through the ballroom. Guests complimented every detail. Mom accepted every compliment. I wanted everything to be beautiful. I smiled politely. Nobody corrected her. Around 4 o'clock I drove home to change. The leather portfolio rested carefully on my dining table. I picked it up slowly. Ran my fingers across the embossed family crest. For just a second, I imagined my father opening it, reading Grandma Eleanor's story, seeing the restored photographs, discovering the legal documents. Maybe. Just maybe. He'd finally look at me with pride instead of expectation. It's amazing how hope survives years of disappointment. Even when experience says otherwise. The country club parking lot overflowed with luxury cars when I returned. Guests greeted each other warmly. Servers hurried between banquet tables. Children laughed near the fountain. Everything looked exactly as I'd imagined. Maybe even better. I carried the portfolio toward the entrance. Mom rushed past wearing an elegant navy dress. Oh good, you're here? No hug, no compliment. Can you tell catering table 7 needs another vegetarian meal? Already handled. The photographer needs Dad. I texted him. The slideshow. Already running. She nodded absent-mindedly. Wonderful. Then she disappeared. That single word summarized 35 years. Wonderful. Not because I existed. Because everything worked. I walked toward the seating chart displayed near the ballroom entrance. Guests gathered around searching for their names. I smiled. I'd finalized that chart myself. Or so I thought. I scanned table 1. Mom, Dad, Ethan, his girlfriend. Several honored guests. Table 2. Family friends. Table 3. Relatives. Table 4. Business associates. Table 5. Neighbors. I frowned. Where was I? Maybe I'd overlooked it. I checked again. Every table. Every name. Twice. Rachel Bennett was nowhere. Not even the overflow tables. For a strange second, I wondered if I'd accidentally forgotten to assign myself. Then a familiar voice interrupted. Looking for something? Dad. Standing behind me. Perfect tuxedo. Perfect smile. Perfect timing. I don't see my seat. Oh, he said it casually. As a matter of fact. He pointed toward the detached garage beyond the garden. We had to make a few adjustments. My stomach tightened. What adjustments? He lowered his voice. The main room filled up, so we set up an extended family area. I stared at him. I'm your daughter. He chuckled. Don't make everything so literal. Then he added the sentence I'd remember for the rest of my life. You're practical, Rachel. You'll understand. He placed one hand lightly against my shoulder, guiding me, not toward the ballroom, toward the garage. And in that moment, still carrying the most valuable gift I'd ever prepared for my parents, I followed him. My father didn't wait to see if I followed. He assumed I would. Because I always had. I walked across the stone pathway toward the detached garage, the leather portfolio still tucked beneath my arm. Every step felt strangely quiet, as if my body had already accepted something my heart hadn't. When I pushed open the side door, the smell hit me first. Motor oil, fresh cut grass, dust. The room wasn't decorated. No flowers, no music, no tablecloths that matched the ballroom. Just one folding table with a wrinkled white plastic cover. 3 mismatched chairs, a box fan humming in the corner. And an old riding mower with a tarp thrown over it. There wasn't even a place card with my name. Someone had simply left a paper plate and plastic utensils on the table. For a long moment, I just stood there. Not crying, not angry, just empty. Outside I could hear applause. Someone was giving the welcome speech. The speech I had written for my father. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because sometimes disappointment becomes so complete that your body forgets how else to react. I placed the leather portfolio on the folding table. Inside were nearly 2 years of work. Thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours. Every page created with one purpose: to honor my parents. I stared at it. Then I whispered to myself, they've already decided what I'm worth. About 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps outside. The garage door wasn't completely closed. Voices drifted through the opening. My mother, my father, and Ethan. She'll get over it, Ethan said casually. Dad laughed. Rachel always does. Mom sounded nervous. I hope nobody notices. Dad answered immediately. They won't. Besides, she'll probably spend half the evening fixing problems anyway. Then Ethan chuckled. Honestly, if Rachel sat inside, she'd just make people think she's important. The three of them laughed. I stood completely still. Not because I was shocked anymore. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The forgotten birthdays, the unpaid deposits, the constant phone calls. The expectation that I would solve every crisis. They hadn't been taking advantage of me by accident. It had been the family system all along. I looked down at the portfolio. Slowly, very slowly, I opened it. The restored photographs gleamed beneath the garage light. Grandma Eleanor smiling beside Grandpa Henry. Their wedding. The vineyard. The journals. The legal documents. Every page represented love. But love given to people who had mistaken it for obligation. I carefully closed the portfolio again. Then I made my decision. The anniversary gift would never reach the ballroom. Instead, I walked back to my car. Nobody stopped me. No one even noticed. Everyone assumed I was handling another task. I placed the portfolio in my trunk. Closed it, locked it. Then returned to the reception empty-handed. The ballroom sparkled. Crystal glasses reflected candlelight. Guests laughed over expensive dinners. The string quartet played softly in one corner. Everything looked perfect. Exactly as my mother wanted. She spotted me immediately. Rachel. There you are. The photographer needs everyone for family pictures. I smiled politely. Of course. Nothing else. No complaint. No argument. No mention of the garage. Her shoulders relaxed. She thought the crisis had passed. Family photographs began. The photographer arranged everyone carefully. Parents in the center. Children beside them. Dad looked around. Rachel, I'm here. Come stand beside your brother. For the first time all evening, I looked directly into my father's eyes. No. Silence. What? I'll pass. Guests exchanged confused glances. Dad forced a laugh. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not. The photographer awkwardly lowered his camera. Mom whispered through clenched teeth. We'll discuss this later. I smiled. I agree. Dinner continued. Toasts began. Family friends praised my parents' marriage. Business associates congratulated Dad. Church members called them an inspiration. Every speech described sacrifice, commitment, family values. Listening from the back of the room, I realized something. Every compliment was based on an image. Very few people actually knew my parents. Finally, Dad stood. His anniversary speech. The room became silent. He thanked everyone for coming. Thanked old friends. Thanked neighbors. Thanked Ethan. He thanked the country club staff. He thanked the florist. He even thanked the valet service. My name never came. Not once. 40 years of marriage. 6 months of planning. 2 years preparing a gift. Nothing. People applauded. Dad smiled proudly. Then he said, our daughter prepared a special anniversary surprise. Every head turned toward me. Mom smiled expectantly. Rachel, bring it out. I remained seated. Dad frowned. The gift. I didn't bring it. Silence spread through the ballroom. Mom blinked. What do you mean? I decided not to. Dad's smile disappeared. What kind of joke is this? It's not a joke. You spent months talking about that gift. I did? So where is it? In my car. Go get it. No. The room had become perfectly quiet. You could hear glasses touching tables. No music. No conversations. Nothing. Dad's voice hardened. Rachel, I said go get it. For 35 years, that tone had worked. Not tonight. I won't. People shifted uncomfortably. Mom stepped closer. Please don't embarrass us. I looked at her calmly. You embarrassed yourselves. Dad's face reddened. What exactly is your problem? My problem. I took a slow breath. My problem is discovering that every stranger in this room deserved a seat inside. Except your daughter. A murmur spread across the guests. Dad glanced around nervously. That wasn't personal. It was logistics. I nodded. So was putting me beside the lawn mower. No one spoke. Several relatives looked confused. One of Dad's Gulf friends frowned. What lawnmower? I answered before Dad could. The garage. The folding table. The plastic plate. The place where my father decided his own daughter belonged tonight. A gasp echoed through the ballroom. Even Ethan looked uncomfortable. Dad immediately tried to recover. Rachel is exaggerating. I'm not. It was temporary. I was there for 45 minutes. It wasn't meant as an insult. Then why wasn't Ethan sitting there? Dad had no answer. Why wasn't Tyler sitting there? Silence. Why wasn't anyone else's child eating beside the lawn equipment? No answer. I reached into my purse. Pulled out my phone. I wasn't going to show anyone this. But perhaps everyone deserves context. Earlier, while walking toward the garage, I'd unknowingly activated the voice recorder on my phone. It had captured everything, including the conversation outside the garage. Rachel always gets over it. She'll fix problems anyway. She thinks she's important. The recording filled the ballroom. No one moved. No one interrupted. When it ended, the silence felt heavier than any argument. Dad looked around the room, searching for support. He found none. My Aunt Susan stood first. You put Rachel in the garage. My uncle slowly shook his head. I thought she chose to eat later. One by one, guests realized what had happened. The celebration suddenly felt different. Not because I ruined it. Because the truth entered the room. Dad finally looked at me. What was in the gift? I smiled sadly. It doesn't matter anymore. It does. Numbu. It mattered before the garage. No. It belongs somewhere else. The following Monday I met with the board of the Bennett Historical Society. Instead of donating the restored family history to my parents' I donated it to the local museum. Grandma Eleanor's story finally became part of the town's permanent historical archive. Her sacrifice would never again be forgotten. The legal preservation work I'd completed for the vineyard remained protected. But ownership decisions would wait. Respect couldn't be restored with paperwork. My parents called. Again and again, first with excuses, then explanations, then anger, finally silence. Months passed. For the first time since college, no one asked me to solve their problems. It felt unfamiliar, then peaceful. A year later I bought a small farmhouse outside town. Nothing extravagant. Just enough land for a garden, a porch, a long wooden dining table that seated 10 people. Whenever friends visited, everyone sat together, no reserved seats, no favorites, no garage. Because I'd learned something that anniversary night. A family isn't defined by who shares your last name. It's defined by who saves a chair for you before you arrive. And if someone repeatedly sends you to the garage, sometimes the greatest revenge isn't taking something from them. It's quietly building a home where you never have to ask if you belong again. If this story kept you watching until the very end, don't forget to subscribe to the Family Conspiracy. Hit the like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? We read every comment. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next unforgettable story.